The Virtual World Society. Join us in building better realities together.
Welcome, everyone, to another Fireside Chat with the Virtual World Society and Dr. Tom Furness. We hold these events regularly here in EngageXR. We've also traveled around to other platforms so that we can broaden our horizons, but we're here today in EngageXR in this beautiful Victorian library. And we have a really, really special guest. Dan Blair is here to talk with Tom, and I'm going to let him introduce him in a minute, but I get the honor of introducing the amazing Tom Furness, who, for those of you who are here in VR, it still blows my mind that if it wasn't for the work that Tom did, these things would not be on our faces. It's really amazing, and we're so honored to be here with the grandfather of VR, and he is not stopping. There are new inventions. We're trying to get you out of the day-to-day administration so you can go back and invent more stuff for us to put on our face and in our eyeballs and in our brains, because the work you have done has revolutionized immersive technology and emerging technology, and with AI, it's even more exciting. So thank you, Tom, for all that you do. And we're also going to be talking about that Virtual World Society is going to be overrepresented at AWE coming up in just a few weeks, and a lot more other news coming. But first, Tom, thank you for being here. My name is Laurel. I'm with Educators in VR. And so, Tom, if you could please introduce Dan, and let's get going.
Okay, thanks so much, Laurel. Really appreciate all that you've done to help us create these events. And I first met Laurel in VR, through Educators in VR. And so here we are. We're actually using the technology together, even though we're coming from all kinds of different physical spaces. And delighted to have you attend, and especially my guest, Dan Blair. Now, Dan, as I put in my post, my LinkedIn post, is a rainmaker. And you'll find out here in a few minutes why I call him that. Why don't you put up the next slide? You get a good shot of him and what he looks like in his normal physical embodiment, encapsulation. Laurel, can you bring that one up? That first slide of Dan. There he is. So Dan, what's that headset you have on?
So that's a fun picture. I'm sure everyone in here knows that that's the DK2. But the fun thing about that DK2 is it was one of the first that was ever sent out, and that is the photo that I took of myself the moment that I decided to quit my job and start my company. So up until that point, I had been working in VR like on the side, but that photo was literally the moment that I quit my job.
Okay, now Dan, what we're gonna do is a little bit different. We're gonna jump into you can talk about your company right at the beginning, and then we're gonna dig into a little background about you and find out what makes you tick. Okay, is that all right?
Absolutely.
So start off and tell about this amazing what this whole company is that you're doing.
For sure. So BSDXR, we've had a couple different names over the years. We've gone by just BSD. We've gone by Bit Space Development. So you may have heard of us. However, we generally don't spend a lot of money on marketing, and we try to let our work speak for us. And I'm really honored to be able to have clients within this space as well. So big shout out to Michelle and Rob here, because over the last few years, we've been working on a lot of really exciting worlds and stories to help improve the workflow and the educational flow within the Indigenous language program at Georgian College. Mm-hmm. So BSD is really focused on digital worlds. And I mean that in a couple different ways. So we spend a lot of time working with VR as a medium to view the worlds that we create, but we've also spent a lot of time, money, and effort investing in data collection backend systems for IoT and real world sensor data, and the workflows to create realistic and high availability digital twins using that technology. So we have a couple different platforms called Swarm and VR Safety, which build off of the infrastructure that we developed to be able to leverage real world environments to learn in. And we've applied that in a number of different ways in aerospace and rail, defense. We've done everything from human physiology engines to help you learn how to properly react to a tactical combat scenario, but also through educational and cultural experiences as well. So I try to do more good than harm with my work, which is, I think, what we can all just strive for. Mm-hmm. And I try to create opportunity. The interesting thing about the journey for BSDXR is, despite being started 10 years ago, I feel like I'm really just taking off now. And that was because we had to build the ecosystem to exist in basically from scratch. And part of that I'll talk about more when I talk about more about myself. But full transparency to the group, I wanted to talk about the company very, very briefly up front, because after this, I don't want this to be a salesy kind of discussion.
Well, Dan, by the way, in his other life, he goes beyond being the proprietor of his company to he actually is on the board of the directors of the Virtual World Society. So we really have gotten to know him really well. He's made enormous contributions there. But here's the thing. Guess where, probably a lot of you know from where he's actually physically located right now. I mean, there's this obscure province in Canada that is called Manitoba. And I mean, it's sort of in the middle of nowhere. And there's a little town there called Winnipeg. And who ever heard of a world-changing activity in Winnipeg?
Other than Louise.
We're going to hear about that. Okay, Louise is a world change. Okay, and so as it turns out, so are you, Dan. So just say a few things about Winnipeg and Manitoba and what it's brought to the world.
So Manitoba is an interesting place. Outside of the realm of XR and immersive technology, which is largely why we're all here, it should be noted that cell phones were also invented through here. So Marty Mobile, who invented the first cell phone, is from Winnipeg. I had the honor of meeting him recently at an event a couple years ago, which is pretty cool. And I got to hold the original phone. But aside from that, Winnipeg has been very influential in the XR space. A lot of really cool companies have come from here. So Flipside XR is one of them. They are an awesome content creation tool. It's similar to Mindshow in the sense that you can create shows all within VR. Some really great award-winning content has been produced out of here by companies like Zenfry, my own, which is BSDXR. But the history of immersive technology goes back really, really far. And Liquid Image was originally founded here as well. And so some of the original headsets, long before the DK1, so the original VFX headsets and some of the really old monocular displays, which, I guess time is relative. So when I say really old, maybe that doesn't feel as old for everybody. But either way, a lot of the original hardware came from Winnipeg. And so we are geographically at the center of Canada. There's literally a sign just out of the city that says the center of Canada. So we get a lot of people that stop there on Highway number 1, which is the Trans-Canada Highway. More recently, it has also been a sort of a vector for a lot of traditional business. So we have a program here called Centerport. So a lot of shipping and logistics come through Winnipeg and out through the rest of Canada. And because of that, we have a lot of big industry that is starting to build up here, and a lot of headquarters and training facilities for large traditional industries for some of our clients like CN Rail, PCL Construction, and stuff like that. Manitoba is also has one of the largest Indigenous populations in Canada and has been putting a lot of effort into truth and reconciliation, and it's long from completing that. However, that means we have very active communities here. I've had the honor of working with many of them. Some of them would include Peguis First Nations and various other remote northern communities. And we've got a lot of emphasis around emerging and immersive technology in our school systems here. I've been personally involved in the creation of a couple different things, one of which is the ACE project space out of Red River College Polytechnic, where we are bridging the gap between academia and the startup ecosystem, where startups can access talent. And I've also been involved in the creation of our award-winning startup ecosystem and interactive digital media ecosystem here.
Wow. So just a question about Manitoba and Winnipeg. Just what is the snowfall there every winter?
So we are in the prairies, and we not only don't have mountains, we also don't have a ton of trees, which means that all the snow blows in here. And it can be pretty aggressive. We can get several feet of snow in a single storm, and sometimes we have very turbulent weather, largely sent to us from the mountains. So thanks a lot, Louise. Call her out at least 3 more times in this chat. But we get a lot of aggressive and abrupt weather. So sometimes we can go from -40 in the winter up to and I'm in Celsius, so don't come at me with your imperial units, guys. But we can go from extreme colds to extreme warms in a very short period of time, and we can get a lot of snow. So whereas a lot of areas in Ontario will get a lot more ice and rain than us, we'll get a lot more aggressive snowfalls and blizzards in the winter.
Well, I'm convinced that that's why you're so productive, because you can't go outside. There's nothing you can do in the wintertime. Okay, let's find out a little bit more about you. Let's dig down to what really makes you tick. Were you a ready-made born nerd? I mean, what's the deal? Tell us about your early days.
So I used to think I was cool, but in retrospective, I realized that I've always just been a big nerd, and so I'll date myself, but also understand that I'm not that old. So I'll be 34 this year, which means that I was 10 when The Matrix came out. And that means that in the year 2000, I binged watched The Matrix a lot. And that'll explain a lot to everybody here. Why everything I'm focused on is digital worlds and MLOps infrastructure and stuff along those lines. Like I said, I thought I was cool, and maybe I was, so that's all relative. However, when I was around 5, I got exposed to Linux and computer games for the first time, and it's been all downhill ever since. So as a kid, I used to literally sit there and fantasize about having my own computer. I had access to a computer at my grandparents' house, which allowed me to go and play video games and wonder about how they work, and start to think about how can I modify these things to be how I want them to be? And so I would take older video games and start to hack them. How can I modify this? So I got really into modding games and really bending them to my will, and starting to kind of wonder, how do these digital worlds expand out, and imagining how they can be extrapolated into this. Of course, we weren't here yet. How could we live within these digital worlds? And maybe that was a bleak outlook, because like the games in like the early 2000s and late 90s were, maybe not all, great. If you think of it, there's a lot of dystopian future stuff, but still. So in that process, though, as I grew and went into school, eventually by the time I got to high school, I decided to take a computer hardware class, and I didn't realize that would change my trajectory forever. And my instructor at the time, who I still talk to, his name is Gary Yakumoski, and he teaches the electrical program at Sturgeon Creek High School, which I went to, which I guess is now Sturgeon or College, because we're half French, half English up here. College Sturgeon Heights Collegiate, because it merged with another school. But I took that electrical program, but I wanted to get a trades diploma so that I could have maximum options in the future. And so I took as many technical programs as I could, everything from welding, which is funny because a lot of these will actually resonate with simulators we have since built. So welding and high voltage power line tech work, as well as power tools and woodworking and power mechanics and stuff along those lines. Interestingly, I also took hairstyling. So I could weirdly do the hair of all my daughters and cut my own hair, which has now just become buzzing my own head. But it's been a useful skill, probably the most useful skill that I learned in high school, aside from computer hardware, I guess. But I was tasked by that teacher with, if I want to learn how a computer works properly today, I had to look at where we came from. And so I had to first build like a 486 computer, and I had to learn how to install DOS and Windows 3.1 and all that jazz up until the most modern, which at the time was Windows XP. And then by the time I had finished that trajectory, I was allowed to keep that computer. And so I started learning about how could I connect computers together, and started teaching myself about networking and servers and infrastructure and a lot of that stuff. What I did not know at the time was that I was building the foundation for what I would ultimately do today. But in that timeline, I went from knowing about how to mess with software and games, learning about the computer hardware that it runs on, and how everything would build how everything can kind of build off of each other to create something bigger, and how can we amplify that and scale out that infrastructure. And that eventually led to college and all the non-obvious opportunities that came along with that through networking, which weirdly ended up with me in this chair with you.
That's right. But there was something else you told me that was sort of a tipping point for you, which was a paradigm shift when you became a father.
Yes. So, and I don't tell this story a lot, so this is probably the first time I'm really telling this story in public. But so when I was 18, I had a kid, and I vowed to not be a statistic, and so I very much channeled all of the effort to giving her which came along with giving her a good life, and now she's turning 16, so far so good. It's getting her driver's license and all that, so stay off the roads if you ever come to Winnipeg, because she's still learning. No, she's doing pretty good. But because my whole world had shifted, and I still was on the trajectory to really digging into technology and making something out of myself, I really had to put a lot of effort into really the only thing that actually matters to me, which is producing a future for my children. And I want that future to be a good place. And so I put all of my effort into making the places that I have influence on or can have influence on to be better for everybody. Since then, I've had 2 more daughters. And so being a father to 3 daughters is the most important cornerstone in my guiding compass for how I conduct business and how I try to make the community a better place.
Has your older daughter started dating yet?
Yes.
For a father, this is a journey to hell. You die 1,000 deaths.
I try to guide with compassion and but it's, oh man, it's a challenge sometimes.
Okay. Well, let's getting back to the stuff, to this hardware motivation you have, but it's way more than that. I mean, certainly you have made connections. You mentioned about the Indigenous people, Indigenous languages, and things like that. So it's really more than just the kit that you're building. It's really something that is more a systems-oriented approach to things. Why don't you tell us a little more about these application domains that really turn you on and that you are excited about?
I like solving problems, which sounds like the most generic thing that someone could ever say that runs a business, but I legitimately mean that. And you can talk to Rob and Michelle at some point, and hopefully they'll back me up. But I care more about the problem that we're solving than sometimes the business behind it. And so I'm a regular at overextending myself, and I'm still learning how to say no to things sometimes, but that's not important for this right now. To me, I like to make sure that what we ultimately work with, or what I put my time and effort into, so whether it's through my company or the sector council that I work with, or the VWS, or any of the things that I try to lend my time to, I try to make sure that what we are ultimately putting in place can be repeatable and can be scaled and we can grow with. And if we don't build that foundation that can expand, then we're going to run into the same problems over and over again. And so for me, looking at my local ecosystem and again, putting a lot of effort into building the ecosystem I can even exist within. And so part of that was getting involved in our provincial government, getting involved in the chambers of commerces and the various associations that exist in my neck of the woods to try and bring more attention to our local market, to create opportunities for people around us, not just myself, but for the entire sector. And that's everything from consulting on tax credits and school programs and all those fun things. But the whole focus right now is trying to create an environment where we can leave things better than we found them. And I don't mean that in an objective way of like, I want it to be the way that I want it to be. I mean, working with a group where everybody can work together and we can look at it through an ethical lens and make sure that it is better for everybody involved. So everyone gets a say in how that gets put together. And so far, we've been tremendously successful in our neck of the woods. So one of the associations that I work with is called New Media Manitoba. And New Media Manitoba is an interactive digital media sector council. And in Canada, not every province, but some of the provinces have sector councils, which are provincially funded not-for-profits that service specific areas of business. And so my sector is technology. We work with another group called Tech Manitoba that deals with a lot of the exciting IT positions and a lot of IT workforce development that happens within the province. And we are focused on interactive digital media. And so interactive digital media is everything from video games to anything you really interact with. So WebXR and web development, stuff like that falls within interactive digital media, depending on if it's a non-linear experience. And so with that association, we've been able to put together a lot of really exciting initiatives, a lot of which complement and may even in the future overlap with work that we're trying to do at the Virtual World Society, which has been, can be easily summarized as award-winning programs within DEI and hiring incentives, as well as a brand new $3.5 million virtual production studio that was developed in our historic Portage in Maine, which is the main intersection downtown Winnipeg. We're right underground there. And what we've done is we've built a large-scale virtual production stage that is run by a not-for-profit. And the reason that's important is it's the most advanced virtual production stage in the central Canada, but it's also publicly accessible. So we've opened that up to the entire film industry. We've opened that up to partners and all kinds of companies that want to use it for training and learning how to use the equipment, but we can shoot full-scale productions in there. And because it's connected to the not-for-profit, there's a lot less in regards to bureaucracy that comes into utilizing the space. And so we've tried very hard to make sure now that people outside of the province can access these tools so that we can skill up everyone around us. And that has a trickle-down effect, and not in a weird way, but in a sense that like we are able to empower people to get access to this technology so that they can start businesses. And so part of what I'm really driven by is economic development and workforce development, meaning that we want to bring new opportunities into a region, and we want to train the local forces on how to use those technologies so that way we can continue to advance the entire industry. Which may sound counterproductive if you consider the fact that I'm a business person, and maybe I'm just not the best business person.
Well, you know, you're basically a nerd, right? And you like to smell burning solder. You like hands-on, and now these things are outgrowth of your interest and the impact of your technology. But what is it now? You know, you've been in this industry for a while, and you've seen the evolution of our both our hardware, software, technology, and applications. All this kind of stuff is out there. But what is it right now that really excites you? It's sort of maybe something that's missing, that you feel that you're in a position to sort of close the gap or fill the hole. Tell us what that is. What that is it that you see immediately?
Yeah, there's two things. So on a personal level, digging back to the fact that I had a kid very young, I was stuck in a mindset of making up for lost time, which is not true. I understand that it's not true, but for almost the entire career that I've had, I felt like I'm making up for lost time in the sense that I put a lot of things on hold to properly build a foundation for my child. And I do not regret that at all, even in the slightest, but it still put me in a mentality where I needed to burn twice as hard to try and make up for the like gap in time between finishing my college education and finishing high school because of what I was building in between. Now, the reason that I'm so excited about the technology space where we are right now is because we've never had access to such an ability to connect with people ever before. And so what we're able to do right now is create experiences that literally bridge geographic regions together, come together on a common ground, and we can expand that by leveraging the physical world that we're in. And so I'm really driven right now by the idea of creating a perfect replication of a physical space digitally, because it has a weird philosophical implication to me. Is once I can produce that, it starts to make me think about like, what is the limits of a simulation? And so that is kind of like my weird nerdy drive, is like, how far can you push a sim?
Well, you had a question for the audience in this regard, I believe, right?
Yes. So for everybody in the room, I just want you to ponder this, and you're only allowed to think of 1 to 5 words because it's really a brief feeling. So a word that describes your feeling, or just a few words to help you describe that. What does it mean for you guys when you think of your sense of self in a fully simulated environment?
So wait a minute. So what do you think of yourself as your avatar? What do you think of yourself as your being?
Your sense of self. That could be your
Sense of
avatar.
self.
That could also just be what's inside of you. There's no right or wrong answer.
Okay, so 3 words, and you all have been unmuted, so you can just unmute yourself. For those that are in 2D, in desktop, you can hit the M button to unmute, and for those that are in VR headset, just look at your watch, and you can unmute. Who wants to go first? Three words?
He said 1 to 5. So
1 to 5.
1 to 5.
Okay,
Yeah,
I thought I heard
one
less.
How does
Okay,
that make you feel?
keep it short. Keep it short. Okay. That represent yourself.
How about,
Steph, yeah?
how about remote consciousness?
Remote consciousness.
consciousness.
Ooh, I like that. Okay, we got Rob Sigmore in the back, right? Go for it.
Yeah, virtual reality is reality. There's no difference.
Virtual reality is reality, no difference. Excellent. Okay. Michael?
The classic one,
no,
presence.
Presence?
Presence.
Just presence, great. And up on top? Breathing into your
Our
microphone?
brains
Go
already
for
do
it.
this.
Okay.
We do it at a higher resolution in our bodies, just a lower resolution using technology.
Okay.
I would say that that I'm already there, like, right? So my brain's already in that hyper reality, experiencing this is reality now. And everything that we can do in VR is happening just as wonderfully as could be.
I like that. This is reality now. I love that one. That's like a great tagline page.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. All right, anyone else? Good test. Well, I want to know what your 2 words are. Tom, what's yours?
I would, gosh, I've thought about 10 different things here in just the last few minutes. But one of the things I have found in this simulated environment is just a whole new world of wonder. It brings, I mean, they're just unlimited wonders to experience. And so me, from the standpoint of myself, I am more of a wanderer because I'm a wanderer in virtual world.
I'm a wanderer. I love it. Dan, what about you?
So mine is a 2-word answer, and the first word would be very similar to wonder or our awe at the fact that we can extend our reality. And I will shamelessly plug my 2016 TED Talk, Reforging Reality, which is very cringy, but I talk just specifically about the concept of reality and what that means to you in a headset. And keep in mind that like the HTC Vive had just come out. But the second word is dread. And the reason that I choose dread as my second word is because we all understand as people in VR what we can push in regards to the limits of VR and where we all would like this to go. But the reason that I say dread is because we have some fundamental issues that we need to resolve before we can fully simulate ourselves. And part of that is our concept of what does it mean as like what is ourself? What is our concept of self? But we also need to understand what is the concept of ownership and identity. Because when people come into these spaces, there's nothing stopping you from representing yourself in any way, which is totally fine. But what does that mean when you represent yourself as somebody else, or you take somebody else's identity and make it part of your own? And so the reason I bring that up is I work with a lot of Indigenous groups. And if you go to my LinkedIn, I explicitly call myself a technology enabler. Because I don't want to tell other people's stories for them. I want them to tell their stories. And so when I work with Indigenous groups, especially up here in Canada, where truth and reconciliation is a big part of what we talk about right now, especially in Winnipeg, I don't want to take their stories. I want to help tell the stories and bring the technology to the table. But there is such a fine line between how we represent our sense of self in a space and the space that we're in and that we create, and leveraging somebody else's story for our own benefit. And so we, as a species, I don't know that we can fully comprehend what our sense of self really means in a simulation. And so that fills me with a bit of dread.
Okay, so now now that you're associated with the Virtual World Society, through your lens and being acquainted with the board and with the staff, what do you see as the most important thing that we should be doing in the Virtual World Society to promote the use and the betterment of mankind because of this technology?
So I think that the most important thing that the Virtual World Society is doing right now is facilitating those conversations. So we're bringing very, very talented people to the table at industry roundtable events, at large real life conferences, not just in VR, but also as part of our science and ethics groups and subcommittees. And we're starting to have those conversations. What does ownership mean? What is the ethical boundaries around hardware and software? And trying to make sure that we are facilitating those discussions from the space of humanity. Because we are all able to come together, but there are some big challenges that come with that. And so the Virtual World Society, because it was founded with love by Tom, I think it positions us really, really nicely to be that center stone of ethical discussion and keeping humanity at the front of that discussion. And we work really well with other groups that keep that mission at their heart as well. So we've aligned really closely with Educators in VR and XR Guild and other groups that are really, really focused around you. And so the people in this room are important to us because you're all people. And we want to make sure that your stories are able to be told and that you're able to have an equitable and represented experience in the virtual reality spaces that you go to. And so with the VWS, being able to amplify these messages and being able to pull people together, including all of you, allows us to make sure that we have voice and power in numbers. And so that, I think, is the most impactful thing that can happen right now, because if we don't speak up about ethical concerns, nobody else will. Or everyone will, but if it's not organized like as a group, we can't make sure that like we're all being represented.
Very, thank you for that. This might be a good time to show the slide about some of the things that you've been involved with at the Virtual World Society regarding the upcoming event at AWE. You want to tell us a little bit about that? Laurel, can you bring up that slide? While she's doing that, Dan has been in the background, and this is probably the first. Okay.
Sorry, Tom. Sorry to interrupt. Laurel had an emergency. She had to step out for a second.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Don't worry. We'll put the slide up after.
Yeah, we'll put it up. Okay. Why don't you tell us, Dan? You take over.
So at AWE this year, we've partnered with the XR Guild to do a mixer. So if you're not already planning to attend the AWE event in Long Beach this year, we do have a discount code through our social media channels, as well as it will be on the slide when you see it, to get a 20% discount on your tickets. Strongly recommend you attend. But at AWE this year, on the first night, we are doing a mixer with the XR Guild. We've got 3 industry DJs, so Alan Smithson, Julian Reyes, and Celeste will all be spinning at our event. We will be focusing on bringing together ethical thought leaders and industry leaders into one space. The event is free, so you will have to RSVP, and it will be accessible through xrguild.org/mixer. The event should be a great time. It really is focused around bringing together people to talk about the challenges that we're facing as an industry in a neutral territory, offsite, but still aligned with a lot of the important groups and discussions that are happening at AWE. So this is really, really focused around making sure that all of you have a place to be and a place to connect and can feel accepted and be part of that discussion. So the mixer, it is at 8 p.m. Long Beach, and it will run until, I believe, I had to take my glasses off, so maybe it says it on there.
I think it's at 11, isn't it?
Yeah, it's 8 to 11.
Does it say 8 to 11?
Yeah, it doesn't say on there, but yeah, I'm in VR. Here I am. You can see glasses on my face on my avatar, but I had to take them off to put my headset on. But yeah. So in addition to this, we are also we do have a booth at AWE. So I insist all of you to come down, say hello, get a sticker, and take a picture with us, because that's always the best part. And there are a number of talks that we'll be showing off as well. Now, there's a non-exhaustive list of VWS aligned speaking engagements, but there's a lot of great discussions. You'll see Alvin Graylin, one of our board members, as well as Avi Barziv, Leslie Shannon, also board members. Laura is doing a workshop. You can come hang out at my talk if you like, but Angelina will be there, and she's way cooler than me. And of course, Dr. Furness giving a fantastic talk as well. So the VWS will have a heavy presence at Augmented World Expo this year, and I strongly recommend that all of you come and join. I'm hoping that you're going to be there already. So.
And Tom, could you talk, or both of you talk also about the Hall of Fame, XR Hall of Fame?
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, one of the things that the Augmented World Expo, AWE, this is really probably the world center kind of conference for our community, and it's switched from Santa Clara in California to Long Beach because it's actually grown so much, and hopefully that if you can't go there physically, you'll be able to watch the videos later on the YouTube channel with them. But the one of the things that AWE decided to do, and it was prompted by other individuals like Ben Irwin, is to actually, we need a Hall of Fame, because this community, even though I'm sort of one of the oldest ones in it, I'm 81 right now, and I've been working on this for pretty much my whole professional career, and still going strong, hopefully, and we'll be able to continue to for another not 81 years, but maybe 40. And because all this new technology we have is going to do that for me, right, Dan? Yeah, you're going to be working on that. Okay, so one of the things that was decided is, okay, there are a lot of pioneers, and up to, I think, 2015, from the 0 to 2015. And what the AWE wanted to do was to recognize those 100 pioneers. And I call it a Hall of Fame, and so that is actually, you can go online and go to the presentation where these were made. Wonderful people, good bio for each of them, and but those are just, I mean, there are more. Ones I recommended way more than what they actually were able to put into 100. Or 101, I think it was. But now what's going to happen is it's going to be continuing. And now from 2015 to the present day, there are a whole bunch of others. And the whole idea of this is to show that we really are a community, and that it's not one person that's doing this. It really takes a village to build VR, and with the different kinds of capabilities and talents and love and passion. I can't think of another community that has the passion that we have here, because it's been brewing for a long time, and the potential impact of it, of transforming our civilization. So that's what Laurel was referring to, the Hall of Fame. And be sure to go online to YouTube and just look for the XR Hall of Fame, and I'm sure you can see that. So, do we have anything else to announce about the AWE?
I think it would be worth mentioning that we do have Next Into Award ceremony scheduled at AWE as well. So we'll be announcing more Next Int winners at the, I believe, closing ceremonies.
Yes, the AWE, we're sort of joined at the hip with those folks. They are really helping us a lot. We'll have a huge presence, including the booth that Dan mentioned, but we also have our own award ceremony called the Nextant Prize. And the Nextant term comes from the idea of the next sextant, the navigation tool for the future. And we'll have a number of presentations to make there, youth presentations on what we call a Spirit Nextant Prize, and then we have a Legacy Nextant Prize, and then we have the Rising Star Nextant Prize that will be presented. And so it is a great time to, there in the closing ceremonies, with their saving us the best to last, for us to make our presentations there. So thanks for remembering that and reminding us.
Yeah, and also a shout out to Rob over here as a previous next in winner.
Yes,
so.
Rob.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and Rob is finally going to get his trophy, I think.
Yes. Rob, it's ready to be shipped to you.
Yeah.
Your virtual trophy. Be happy with your virtual one so far.
Yes, fantastic. And again, it's our way to recognize amazing people who've made a huge contribution to making all this happen. But before we have some other things at the very last, but I want us to go back to you, Dan. We have a few minutes left, and what do you think about opening up to the audience for questions?
Oh, absolutely.
And let's hear you answer some questions for the folks might have. Okay, Laurel?
You guys can ask me about Winnipeg. You can ask me about the VWS. You can ask me about the company. You can ask me about anything you want. I'm generally very friendly and approachable. Yeah, you ask me about having 3 daughters.
Any questions for Dan? He's opening it up to.
Well, I have a question to get things started. So you all can unmute yourself when you're ready if you have something to say, but do stay muted to avoid any background noise if you're not speaking. What you've done is worked within a community where you've made technology become vital. And there are so many communities all around the world that have that same goal. I know Tom's worked with them, we've worked with them. And what are some of the barriers, just 2 or 3 of the barriers that you had to overcome that you think would be common all the way across for developing countries and areas and things?
So one of the main issues that I've ran into has been access to the technology at all. So like one thing, I'm using a Quest 3 right now, nice headset, but remember I deal in Canadian dollars, so whatever Americans are paying, add 30%, and there's my price. And you times that by 20, and there's the minimum deployment for a community. And one of the issues that we run into right now is not only do we need to deploy headsets into these communities, we have to jump through the logistical loop, the logistical hoops of access to infrastructure at all. Do they have anywhere to lock up the headsets? Do they have an IT department to manage the headsets? Do they have network connectivity? Largely, no. It is a massive issue in rural communities in Manitoba, Ontario, and other provinces where they just simply don't have access to a robust internet connection. And so even the experiences that we create on Engage often require a standalone single-player version for when we go into communities to show content, because otherwise we cannot access the Engage service at all. Another issue that we run into frequently is a lot of the experiences that are developed or created for rural communities are grant funded. And I don't think that's necessarily an issue, but in Canada, grants work a little different than in the US. We have a lot more smaller and more high availability grants. However, they're extremely subscribed. So there's a lot of people applying for the same buckets of money. And so we get a lot of the same problems being solved over and over and over again with no consistency between engines and headsets and stuff along those lines. And so whenever the organizations that we work with try to standardize, we find that there's always like a handful of stuff that's very consistent, built in Unity, et cetera. And then we got like one thing over here that requires a network connection all the time. And so we run into a lot of ethical considerations when it comes into the actual deployment side of things, because one, is the community going to be trained up on how to access or how to leverage the content? 2, how do we manage that long term? Because I would like to say I can help everybody forever for free, but it becomes a logistical issue where I now have to pick and choose how I distribute that help, because I just simply don't have the largest team that has ever existed and unlimited availability to troubleshoot. So the biggest challenge is not necessarily accessing the funding, but it's keeping it maintainable and scalable long term. That is only amplified by the state of our hardware ecosystem, where every year we seem to get another slight improvement on the headset now, but there is very little interoperability between brands. And so if we develop for one, even if we fully support OpenXR, we still run into issues when we port to another headset. And like schools, for one, there's very little support from any of the headset manufacturers when it comes to like a university getting access to subsidized equipment. But that also doesn't solve the problem. If the university accesses subsidized equipment, do all the developers also have access to that equipment? And so there's a lot of work, I think, that needs to be done in regards to standardization on runtimes and standardization when it comes to hardware. But I'm also, now that we're 10 years into doing this, I'm seeing a lot of my previous clients that were very, very happy with like a Quest 1 deployment or even a pre-Quest deployment on like an older Pico Goblin or Neo 1 experience, where now they want to upgrade the experience. However, and Pico is not the greatest for this as well, but Meta has been also not the best for supporting older equipment, and the upgrade pathway is not as straightforward as it should be. And so if a client or if a community was an early adopter into a hardware ecosystem and software ecosystem, we're likely looking at like a full Unity upgrade, a hardware upgrade, like everything. It's to the point where we now have to almost redo the entire deployment to support anyone that like was on the first couple versions of standalone headsets. Which, saying that maybe a few years from now will sound ridiculous because maybe we've solved these problems, but the current state of the ecosystem doesn't lend itself nicely to schools or communities that are trying to access equipment and need to be able to think long term. Because a lot of grants will fund the startup, but they will not fund the maintenance. And so you can get something in place, but once they need to make any tweaks or adjustments later, that they don't have that kind of support.
Yeah, it's a huge gap in the market. Brilliant. Thank you. All right, who has some questions?
See some hands
go
here.
for it.
Hi, Dan. Hello, Tom.
Hi.
What changes do you foresee in virtual reality within the next decade?
Good question.
Okay, well, so I'm gonna. So keep in mind, I've been in this space for 10 years now, and I could not have predicted where we're at now. In some ways, I thought we'd be way further, and in some ways, I thought we'd be way further behind. I predict that we're going to go way down the rabbit hole with AI for a while to try and circumvent physics issues that we run into with the headsets. So trying to create more responsive equipment and circumvent like the whole aspect of like reprojection mapping on pass-through cameras and stuff along those lines. That is a fine application for AI, but a lot of the interface stuff I think we're going to run into issues with. So I predict that, and this is in line with a lot of the AI prediction stuff that we simply I don't have time to extrapolate on, but we're going to hit sort of a space in the industry where we're really, really disappointed with the outcome of AI. Because we're going to run into an issue with compute long before we have available compute to be able to upgrade the entire AI experience. But we're also going to run into ethical issues, which is very very obvious with the current OpenAI and Scarlett Johansson stuff. If anybody here is following that, I suspect many are. But I suspect that we're going to run into, we're going to see a lot of advancements when it comes to haptics, but also to responding to the body that is in the headset. And what I mean by that is I think that within the next few years, we'll start to see a lot more interfacing in regards to like galvanic skin response and like your body temperature and stuff along those lines to try and have the experiences react to the human that's experiencing it. So if you're feeling fear within like a social experience, like maybe it's automatically adjusting in that sense. And so I think that the headsets will continue to get lighter. I think that pass-through will continue to be important until we make some real jumps in regards to waveguide technology on the mixed reality front. But physics kind of gets in the way in some capacities. So we're definitely going to see a lot of that. And I think that we're going to have a drastic shift away from controllers and more towards hand tracking with a big emphasis on custom peripherals for training experiences and stuff along those lines. So which I am biased towards. So I will immediately identify that I wanted to go in that direction for that piece because I build a lot of custom peripherals. So
I think Rob has also a question.
Rob? Yeah.
Hi. I don't have a question. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background about Dan, that he's too humble to talk about it. And 4 years ago in 2020, I spoke with Chris Madsen to find out if there was someone in the engaged community who would be able to do some world building for us for Michelle O'Brien, who's sitting next to me, for Indigenous Studies, and Chris recommended Dan Blair. So I reached out to Dan and immediately gravitated to Dan because he was a nerd. He wasn't a sales guy. I found him extremely knowledgeable, and it excited me that he knew so much and I could pick his brain about things. And so we quickly signed an agreement. And Michelle O'Brien has been leading Indigenous studies in the XR space for the last 4 years. And Dan built several worlds for us. And, people are talking about, what are the 3-5 words you would use to describe the experience in XR. My 3 key ingredients are presence, context, and agency. And Dan built all of those things. And under Michelle's leadership, we've had so much success with Indigenous language learning in this contextual environment that people have come to know Michelle and Georgian College for Indigenous language studies, to the point where we recently created an organization called Indigenous Peoples in XR, and we've partnered with the Simcoe County District School Board, the Saskatchewan Indian Institute for Technology, the University College of the North in Manitoba. Michelle's talking with about 20 other schools across Canada and around the world, including University of Wollongong in Australia. And so, it's thanks to Dan's incredible generosity with his work and his team and Michelle's leadership that we've had huge success here in Engage VR. So thank you, Dan. And
Thank you, man.
I thought people should know, a little more background about the things that you do.
Thank you,
I appreciate
Rob.
that.
Yeah, Rob, thank you.
I would also like to say, though, that the awards that those experiences are winning are based off of the people and the content that drive them. The worlds mean nothing without those people. Michelle's leadership and Rob's guidance on that program are what are winning those awards, and I am simply a technology enabler.
Love it.
Yeah.
All right, we have time for one more question.
I have one more question.
All right.
This is coming from somebody in Florida. Do you have to worry about static electricity up there with zapping headsets? Do you have like a no sweater policy?
It's not just Florida.
Not just Florida.
Yes and no. Static electricity is a problem, but we have less humidity in the air than you do in Florida, so I think that it is less of a problem here than it is for you.
Oh, I was saying I don't have a problem here. Every time I go up north, I get zapped. So
maybe
I was just wondering if you have any problem with the electronics. Okay,
maybe
all right.
it's
maybe we're very used to it. I did. You know what? My door to my office did zap me on the way in. So maybe I'm just extremely normalized to it.
Yeah,
I think I just shuffle my feet too much. That's what it is.
Which,
all right, thanks.
It is. You brought up a good point that we don't have time to talk about, but one of the issues with a lot of developing nations and areas and regions is headsets that get, especially high humidity or dryness and battery life with coldness, but also getting mildew and literally having the plastic rot right on the headsets. That's a constant thing, and we talk about that a lot with some of our special programs with educators in VR. So thank you for bringing that up. It is a challenge. All right.
Sorry, Laurel. That's also a good reminder to everybody that has Oculus Go's or older Quests or older Picos. Go check on them so the batteries didn't explode.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Take the batteries.
Okay, let's do a little wrapping up here, and then before we kiss Dan goodbye.
Yay.
Laurel, you want to say something about the unconference?
I would love to. So we're partners with Virtual World Society, iLearn, and some other organizations, and we're hosting our second unconference conference. We're just calling the Educators in VR unconference, which is kind of a anything goes. The first one was 2 hours back in, I believe it was in April, and this one in June is going to be 4 hours. We're going to have some timed events, timed speakers, but it's also, please bring your questions, bring your expertise, come in and join us and share your skills, your answers, help answer other people's questions on June 26th here in Engage XR. And we're hoping to have Engage be also doing a presentation of their amazing School of AI. Oh, if you haven't seen that, it's talk about transformative experience. I got to spend like 10 minutes talking with Benjamin Franklin on the definition of liberty and freedom. What an incredible experience. Oh my gosh, that was just amazing. So get ready for that, and we'll be having all kinds of great stuff. Daniel's going to be there, but he's going to be there. And then Tom, who do we have coming up for the next Fireside?
Next Fireside Chat is with Jeremy Dalton. As you see, Jeremy is in charge of the metaverse activities, the XR activities at PricewaterhouseCoopers. You know, he and his team published a lot of the documents not too long ago about the impact of this on XR on education, and he is going to tell us a lot about not his experience in working with myriad of companies and deploying VR in those companies, and how that can transform their business and how they have transformed their business. So we're excited about that coming up. And
Jeremy's book, by the way, is required reading at BSD.
Mm-hmm.
So I recommend that you take a look at his book.
Get that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good stuff that he's done, and we're going to exciting to have him. The podcast, we have our you see here episodes every Friday. We have, I mean, the archives we have in the podcast are amazing, with many of those 100 Hall of Famers that are in there, and as well as our upcoming Hall of Famers. I'm sure we're going to have, like Dan, are there, and so this is one of the resources that we feel that we should be providing as in the virtual world society, is this kind and gentle, as well as thoughtful look at the future and how we can learn from each other, and because everyone has a part to play in this. And so looking at the different perspectives and the collective wisdom that we can gain from that is an important resource, I believe. Now, one other thing I want to mention before we leave is that I have burning inside of me to begin to answer the questions that Tomb Raider asked. What is going to be the future of VR? I began my journey working for the Department of Defense and developing what is called a super cockpit. The super cockpit was interacting with all kinds of different systems in modern fighter aircraft. And this was so far ahead of what was going on in the outside world and what I was doing. And we were trying to solve problems with this. And that's where we found out we have to take into account how humans work to begin with. In the past, these crew systems all happen after the fact. You sort of built the airplane, then you figure out how to stuff the pilot in it. And so the Super Cockpit program was a transformation where you basically are taking advantage of the way humans work, as well as the way the machines work. And even back in when I was working in 1980 and earlier, we were using AI in the cockpit. We had R2-D2. Before R2-D2 showed up in Star Wars, we were actually using that kind of intelligence in the cockpit to take advantage of not only what was going on the outside, but what is going on the inside, what's happening with these people, as Dan mentioned. But to me, the most exciting thing about our technology, about our community, is what happens to us when we take the headset off. Because that's more important than what happens when we put it on. And so the idea of putting the headset on is that we're going to be better when we take the headset off. We're going to be transformed. We're going to be able to see better, understand better, hear better, be more healthy, all of these things. And what I'm going to be talking about in detail at AWE is the notion of a super cockpit for the mind. To take these kinds of things that are missing, paying attention to the human, paying attention to the intent of what we're trying to accomplish, and putting together those technologies, both short-term and long-term, that will lead us to transcendence of our civilization. We've got to do that if we're going to save our planet and save our civilization. So look forward to that, and I'm hoping to talk about that a little bit, Laurel, if it's possible at the unconference. And
absolutely. You think
so
I would turn you down? Of course.
But
Yes.
it's just burning inside of me to be working on that kind of stuff. And already in my labs, we're doing some prototype stuff that is just amazing. And it's amazing. It's breathtaking. Literally, we're actually taking your breath as part of an interface. So, Virtual World Society, if you're not a member, sign up. We'd be delighted to have you. And not only is just your name on the chart, but be active, become active, and join the work that we're trying to do, and work with many wonderful people like with Dan and with Laurel and with Paige and with many others that we have that we're working with. And you're going to be hearing more from Paige as well, and the kind of work she's doing in supporting the Virtual World Society. So with that, Dan and I'll hang on for a little bit.
Yeah,
I'm not done
Dan,
yet.
I want to thank. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say that Dan and I can hang out a little while longer.
Yes.
We're sort of probably overtime, but it'll be informal, and we'll turn off the stage and
the audio, yep, and everything.
Yeah. And we'll be happy to just hang out with you and do some one-on-one stuff if you'd like. Laurel, thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Tom, and thank you to our film crew, all of our support crew with Educators in VR and Virtual World Society. Already started right now here in Engage is the Educators in VR virtual hardware team is talking about VR hardware headsets from a different perspective, from their operating system perspective, which is really fascinating, looking at Android and all the different things. So do check that out. It's going on right now. And thank you, everyone, and we'll see you all at AWA, I hope. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Thanks, guys.